Howdy folks! So today I'm going to do a little demo on sculpting. I personally am not a sculptor, so I don't know the tools definitely as well as some other people, but I just kind of want to give an overview of the types of things you can do and types of things to explore more so you can get a better idea of how you would like to use sculpting with Blender. So there's two main ways to sculpt in Blender. There's the multi-resolution method, and there is the Dynatopo method. You can, for example, actually let me up-res this a little bit. Okay, so if I shade smooth this, make this mesh. Okay, so if I just have a mesh, any topology, and I just start sculpting on it, it will work, which is very similar probably to what people are experiencing with Maya if they want to sculpt something. But there's another method that's significantly better for if you want to like block something out or you just want to test something or get a concept, but it's really good for a remesh base. So the way to activate Dynatopo in any of these tools, it will work, but you need to navigate to the tool menu in the end menu. And then under here, there's a little checkbox for Dynatopo. By default, it's off. When you turn it on, it's going to tell you that it's basically going to break everything. And yeah, essentially any information or data you had on this mesh is just going to be lost. So you definitely don't want to put it like, for example, if you have a model that you want to dynotopo, I would duplicate that model first and then dynotopo it in case you need to go back because you won't be able to. Once you enable it, it will triangulate and it will give you a few different options here. Subdivision collapse tends to work the best. Whether or not you just want one or the other is an option, but honestly, I pretty much always just leave it on subdivide collapse, and all you got to do is paint over it. So it's a lot easier to see without wireframe, but essentially it will just add resolution for you. This resolution is going to be based on the distance from camera, so if I back up a lot, it's going to reduce it, and if I zoom in a lot, it's going to increase it. The detail size is also going to affect it. So the higher I go, like say if I go up to 20, it's going to be a lot bigger. And if I go down to like 2, I can do like much finer detail. Like you can see all the teeny little tries now that are happening over these bigger areas. So if you just need to like add resolution to an area really quickly, that's a great way to do it. And there's another option here for like if you want constant, so like no matter which distance you're at, it'll always give you the same amount. If the distance thing bothers you, that's an option. And there's also a choice to auto smooth as you paint. So you notice how it's kind of crunchy, but if you enable auto smooth, it will, yeah, auto smooth that out, which is pretty nice. And this works really good with a number of tools. It works particularly excellent with the snake hook because it adds geometry as you paint. So you can do, if your detail size is set low enough, I'm going to probably raise it up a little bit, and you have the smoothing on. Just keep in mind that like smoothing will kind of collapse some tools a little bit, particularly the snake hook if I do this, but it gives you a lot of different choices for, yeah, how you protrude geometry. You can get some pretty wonky shapes incredibly quickly. And yeah, if you need to like puff them back up, something to note about the way the sculpting works is some tools you'll notice it starts to like collapse the geometry too much. If it's fully collapsed, there's not really much you can do to save it. You kind of just have to like smooth away those edges to the point where they collapse and disappear, and then you can add new ones. Or if you catch that happening before it's collapsed, you can use the inflate brush and just like puff up all those areas so you don't lose that volume. Like, see, this is what I was talking about. So I'm losing that volume because it was like too thin. It's like it was a lost cause at that point. But you can just re-snake hook the part that you had, and it's fine. So as long as that's enabled, it will keep adding topology and you can just paint to your heart's content. There's a bunch of different tools here. This one's also very neat. It was added recently, so if you need to repose something, you can see the line that it's drawing to. So if I like this point, but it's just not angled correctly, you know, it gives you a lot of different options. There's good nudging options. For example, there was a thumb option. Actually, there's nudge as well if you just need like little bit at a time. You don't want to affect it too much. Like say you don't want to add volume and you don't want to like remove it. You just want to like shift it a little bit. Nudge is really good for that. Grab is also good for shifting things around without changing topology or volume. So you could like very easily snake hook a line out and then start to grab and pull it around. Like say for example, if you don't like using curves or if you want like an alternative, like a sculpting alternative to using curves, that's totally valid. And even after you notice it's starting to like stretch those polys again, you can even take just a regular tool. Honestly, it doesn't even really matter which one you grab. As long as you put the strength like really low and you just paint over it, you'll just like retop without changing the shape at all. So it's very easy to just like pull stuff out, retop it, and then keep going and keep adding. Like for example here, I could just do that. And especially with like auto smooth, just a little bit on, it'll basically smooth that out really nice for you. To smooth stuff out, shift is the hotkey for it, but there's also the actual tool for it if like the strength is too high. And then if you change the strength here and you go to a different tool and you smooth again, it'll maintain that strength setting that you enabled. So that is pretty nice. And yeah, so that's basically how Dynatopo works. It is an object. It is polys, so it's now geometry that I could retop over top or whatever, you know, whatever you want to do. There is a few special sculpting tools that use physics, and I just want to show that in conjunction with multi-res. So I'm going to delete that abomination, and I'm going to make, let's say, like make a deflated basketball, because that's normally something that would take a long time to model and be very technically difficult, but in Blender is quite easy to do. So let's create a cube, subdivide, mesh, flatten out the bottom a little bit, just to give us like a head start on the shape. Drop that down, smooth it. So in order to use multi-res sculpting, you have to apply the modifier called multi-res resolution. And just to explain the difference real quick, because if I enable multi-res and I start subdividing and I turn off optimal display so you can see, it is subdividing normally. And if I were to, whoopsie, not that. If I were to put a subdivision on, it looks identical. There is no difference. And that's because it's true. There is no difference. They are identical. But the big difference is subdivision is just a straight subdivision that you would find in like any other 3D software. It's very standard. But multi-res has extra utilities built into it that are specifically to be used within the context of Blender itself. So like you wouldn't be able to export this to a different software and take use of this, for example. So just to explain how it works, because if I hit Control 2, actually, that's interesting. Okay. I thought if I hit Control 2, it would add a subdivision modifier on top of multi-res, but it does see that I already have a multi-res and it applies that level to it. So those hotkeys do work with multi-res. That's cool. And I would say you don't need multi-res and subdivision. It's like one or the other, because multi-res takes care of what subdivision is, and multi-res is more specifically for like getting a really high res model for baking purposes. I'd say that's more what you would want to use it for. So you can do that manually by sculpting, which I'm about to show, or you can use it with shrink wrap and gather detail from like a displacement map, which I will show a separate time. So in order to get started with sculpting, just subdivide. I tend to go like 3 or 4 times, works pretty good for sculpting. Again, if you turn off optimal display, you can see what your actual resolution is giving you. And you have your different levels here. So if you want to sculpt in a higher resolution but not see it, you can always lower it just for viewport, but those levels will still exist. If you want to remove levels, like say you've gone too high up, say I don't actually need 4, I could go down a level, say delete higher, and now I don't have that 4 level anymore. So it's very easy to go back and then redo the levels that you don't want, or delete the modifier entirely. Okay, so let's keep going here. Got the sculpt mode on. I'm going to turn off wireframe, and I'm going to click on my cloth brush. So this uses physics to paint. The main factors that you're going to care about are the ones in this area. So these are just the different types of ways to apply the effect. So let's do with push and just warp. Okay. Maybe do a little bit more on this side. And then you can combine this with other tools as well. So I really like to combine this with like grab, and you can just kind of like meet. And there we go. We got a flattened basketball. So you'd probably want to test different settings. If you want this to be smoother, for example, it's still not subdivided enough, you can still go smoother after the fact and make it really smooth. You can go up and down, delete higher levels, you know, whatever you want to do, right? Another example, let's do like a pillow or something, because normally that's also something that's a little more difficult. So let's say it's more rectangular. I'll just do like a standard pillow. Probably something like that to start, and then apply a second level of subdivision. I would like to pull this out a little bit more for fun. just make it more pale-y. Okay, so now we have a base pillow shape here. Again, multi-res, subdivide 3 times, why not? Sculpt. And then go back to the cloth brush. And then instead of push, maybe we'll use drag. And then I don't want the effect, like if I just drag right now on it. Actually, that looks pretty decent. But if it was deforming the shape too much, I could increase the plasticity. You could always undo, tweak these settings, try again. Maybe I want a little bit more, you know, on the edges or something. Once you've applied it, you can't go back. Of course, it works like regular undos, but like once you have a solution you like if you kind of drag back and forth from that corner, you can add those lines into the corner. That's an option. But yeah, just kind of experiment with these different ones. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what it does, so how much the applied forces are propagated through the cloth. So that's kind of like how fine the wrinkles are going to get, like, and how easy it is to wrinkle the cloth. The mass, so it's like how much the cloth is going to move, kind of, is like another one. It's a little hard to explain and you'll see it more a bigger effect on some objects than others. Like if I have cloth mass really high, that's probably for like a really heavy rug or something. So as I move it over the surface, it's not really deforming it. But if I make it really light, then it'll deform like quite a lot. So that would be like maybe if you just want to ruffle a sheet or something versus like a rug, that could change what you would want. And then if you increase the plasticity, then like you can move it a lot, but you're not going to change the shape as much. So maybe that's what you would potentially want for like a really wrinkly base. But yeah, there's a ton of different options there. Of course, you have like plain, which could be cool if you want to smooth something out along like a plane. I find the radial is generally more helpful, but yeah, that's a different option. And then of course, if you hate what you did, you can delete the multi-res, create a new one, and then just do it again. You don't even necessarily have to delete it. You can always go back to like I said, you can go back to level 1, delete higher, and then just resubdivide and do it anew. But yeah, those are 2 different ways to work with those methods. And of course, this isn't restricted to the cloth brush. You can use it with anything really. So if I, for example, if I want to draw, I don't know, a line on there, it's still it still works. So if I go back down to 0, if I go fully to 0, it's going to be like as if it's not displaced at all. That's like my base level geometry, but then as I subdivide, it'll increase it. So there you go. And if, from this point, if like, for example, I wanted this geometry shape for some reason, but this is like, obviously if you turn it off, it disappears, and that's not good because you want your high res and your low res to be pretty close. So what I would do at that point is duplicate this guy off, delete the multi-res, have it live on this one, create a shrink wrap to your model, and then actually start like building out the shape and then like retopologizing on that surface and just like building it out manually, because now at least you have, you know, that basis of it and you have that other shape. And yeah, then you can just retop as normal, treat this as like a sculpt object. If you really wanted, you could apply it, and now it's just is that object. So a lot of different uses, a lot of different ways to combine those things, and a lot of different things to play around with. So that's a little introduction to sculpting and the features that I personally like to use, even though I don't really consider myself a sculptor. And yeah, if you like this video, like, subscribe, and look at other videos, and have a good day, y'all.